The nurse slid the clipboard across the front desk without being asked. My sister's smile arrived first, wide and practiced, the kind she wore to PTA meetings and fundraisers. Then her eyes moved to the paper. Her smile didn't fall all at once. It loosened, the way a knot loosens when you pull the wrong end. Her finger traced down the page once, then again, slower. Her breath stopped somewhere between the second line and the third. "That's not possible," she said. "I wasn't in the lobby to watch it. I was upstairs in post-op, still half numb from anesthesia, learning how to take full breaths again. But the nurse, who'd been assigned to my room, a quiet woman named Patricia, with silver-streaked hair and the unhurried manner of someone who had seen everything, she came in later and told me exactly what happened. She said my sister's face went the color of new concrete. She said the hand holding the clipboard started to shake. She said my sister looked up at the desk nurse and said, in a voice stripped of all its usual confidence, 'Who is Clara Hewitt?' And I lay in that hospital bed, with my hands folded over the thin blanket, and I felt something move through my chest that wasn't pain from the incision. It was older than that. It was the specific relief of finally being seen, not by the people who were supposed to see me, but by the one person my mother had spent 20 years pretending didn't exist. My name is Maya. I'm 31 years old. I work as an ER nurse at a regional hospital outside of Columbus, Ohio, where the winters are long and the people in the waiting room are usually scared and trying not to show it. I know what fear looks like when it's being held together by politeness. I've held a lot of hands in my career. I've said we're going to take good care of you to strangers at 2 a.m. more times than I can count. I meant it every time. That's the job. You give steadiness to people who are breaking, and then you go home and figure out how to apply the same principle to your own life. I wasn't very good at the second part. In my family, my sister Danielle was the one with the vision. She'd had a plan since she was 19. The right career, the right man, the right zip code, the right wedding. And she executed it with the kind of precision that looks effortless from the outside and costs someone else everything up close. The someone else was usually me. It started the way these things always start. Small, reasonable, wrapped in love. "Maya, I'm a little short this month. Can you cover the deposit?" "Maya, the venue requires a bigger down payment than we expected." "Maya, you're so good with money. You always land on your feet." That last one was my mother's line. She deployed it the way a chess player moves a specific piece strategically to open a path for what she actually wanted. What she actually wanted was for me to keep subsidizing my sister's life without making it uncomfortable for anyone. And I did. For 4 years. I tracked it once. Late at night, when the apartment was quiet and I couldn't sleep, I opened a spreadsheet with the kind of clinical detachment I use at work when the situation is too big to feel all at once. The number at the bottom was just over $73,000. Emergency loans that were never paid back. Credit card debt I'd absorbed quietly. The deposit on my sister's house. Half the catering for her engagement party. My mother's car repairs, twice. My father's physical therapy after his knee surgery, which his insurance covered only partially. And my sister had said, "I can't right now, Maya, we're saving for the honeymoon," and somehow, that meant I could. I never said I can't right now. I don't think it occurred to me that I was allowed to. The warning signs were there. Nurses are trained to recognize them in other people. Fatigue that doesn't resolve with rest. Appetite changes. The specific kind of brain fog that comes from carrying too much weight for too long. I ignored them in myself. The way you ignore a sound in the walls of your apartment. You know something's wrong, but dealing with it feels like more than you have. The surgery was supposed to be minor. That's what the ER attending said when they ran the imaging. Appendix, inflamed, caught early. You'll be home in 2 days. I called my sister from the pre-op waiting area. I remember sitting in the paper gown under the fluorescent lights and thinking, this is fine, this is manageable. She answered on the 3rd ring. She was in Aruba. The wedding had been 3 weeks prior. A destination event in the Florida Keys that I had contributed $4,000 toward, because my mother said it would mean everything to Danielle and I wanted things to mean something. My sister and her husband had extended the trip into a honeymoon, plus a joint celebration vacation with my mother and father and a rotating cast of friends. They'd been gone 11 days. They had 6 more to go. I told her about the appendix. I kept my voice even. The work voice. the one that doesn't ask for anything. She said, "Oh no, Maya. Is it serious?" I said, "They're taking me back in an hour. It should be straightforward." She said, "Okay, keep me posted." I held the phone for a second after she hung up, waiting for a call back. A text. Anything. My mother called 4 hours later, after I was already out of surgery and in recovery. She asked if I was stable. I said yes. She said, "Good, thank goodness." And then she asked if I'd remembered to water her plants before I went to the hospital, because she'd left her house key with me for exactly that reason. My father didn't call at all that day. He sent a thumbs-up emoji to the group chat when my sister relayed the news. That was the whole message. A thumbs up. They had 9 more days in Aruba. They stayed. The first night I was alone in the room, I didn't sleep. Not because of the pain, though that was real, a hot, insistent ache just below my right side that the medication softened but didn't erase. I didn't sleep because the room was very quiet, and the chair beside my bed was very empty, and for the first time in years I was still enough to feel the full weight of what that meant. I had held hundreds of strangers together in emergency rooms. I had called families in the middle of the night with news that cracked their worlds open, and no one had called mine. No one had come. Patricia was on the night shift. She moved through my room with the efficiency of someone who respects both their patience and their time. She was straightening the blanket around my feet when she glanced toward the door. "Someone's been waiting out there for a few hours," she said. I turned my head. Through the narrow window in the door, I could see the hallway, pale walls, muted light, a figure sitting in one of the chairs along the far wall. Small, older, very still, hands folded in her lap. "Who is that?" I asked. Patricia's expression was carefully neutral. She said, "She's not on your visitor list." "I don't have a visitor list." Patricia looked at me for a moment. Then she said, "That's what I thought. She came in asking for your room. When I told her I couldn't confirm you were here without authorization from you, she sat down in that chair and said she'd wait." "How long ago was that?" Patricia checked her watch. "About 4 hours. I didn't know anyone who would sit in a hospital hallway for 4 hours on the chance of being allowed into a room. I tried to think of a person in my life who would do that and found the inventory depressingly short. "Let her in," I said. She came through the door slowly, like she was trying not to take up too much space. She was in her 60s, small-framed, with white hair cut close and eyes the same dark brown as my mother's. I recognized those eyes, and I didn't know why. She stopped near the foot of the bed and looked at me the way you look at someone when you've been imagining a moment for a very long time and are suddenly uncertain how to begin it. "You probably don't know who I am," she said. Her voice was soft and a little rough, like something that had been put away for a long time. "I don't," I said. She nodded like this was expected. "My name is Clara. Clara Hewitt. I'm your mother's older sister." I stared at her. She held still under my stare. She didn't fill the silence with explanation or apology. She just let it land. My mother didn't have an older sister. That was the family fact, stated plainly whenever it came up in any context. My mother was an only child. She said it the way people say things that are not open for discussion. I looked at the woman in front of me, the shape of the nose, the set of the jaw, things I had looked at in mirrors my whole life, and I understood in a very quick, very quiet way that I had been lied to. "Why are you here?" I asked. She sat down in the chair beside my bed without asking permission. "Because no one else is," she said. "And I've made that mistake before, staying away when I should have shown up. I'm not doing it again." I didn't ask anything else that night. I was too tired for the full version of whatever this was. She seemed to understand that. She stayed in the chair and we watched the muted television together, and she left around midnight. She came back the next night. "And the night after that?" Patricia confirmed it without my asking. "Every night," she said, nodding toward the hallway. "She's here by 8, leaves when you're asleep." Over the next 4 days, between medication checks and the slow work of healing, Clara told me what she knew and what she guessed, and what she'd been carrying for 20 years. She and my mother had stopped speaking when I was 11, a falling out over their own mother's estate, money and resentment, braided together in the way those things always are. My mother had called her names that don't come back from. Clara had gone quiet rather than fight. She'd moved to a different city. She'd stayed gone, but she'd kept track. Not in a intrusive way. She wasn't that kind of person. She'd just kept a thread of awareness. She knew my sister had gotten married. She knew I worked at a hospital. She'd found out I was here through someone I'd once worked alongside, a travel nurse who had overlapped with her at a hospital in Pittsburgh. Small world. The way the world is small when someone is paying attention. She'd driven 4 hours to sit outside my door. I asked her why she hadn't come sooner. Not to the hospital in general. Why hadn't she reached out years ago? She looked at her hands in her lap for a long moment. Because your mother would have poisoned it, she said. She would have told you things about me that weren't true, and you were young, and I didn't want to put that weight on you. I thought I was protecting you by staying away. She paused. I was wrong. I was protecting myself from a harder situation and calling it consideration for you. I've had a long time to understand the difference. I thought about that for a while. Then I said, she told me you didn't exist. Clara's mouth pressed together. Yes, I figured as much. On the 6th day, my sister came home from Aruba. I knew she was coming before she arrived because she called me from the airport. Her voice was warm and practiced, the tone she uses when she wants something to be a certain way. How are you feeling? We came home as soon as we could rearrange the flights. It was such a nightmare getting the airline to cooperate on such short notice. She'd had 6 days after I called her to rearrange the flights. I said I'm fine. I kept my voice even. She said we'll be there first thing tomorrow. She arrived mid-morning, my sister and my mother together, both of them fresh from the airport and carrying the particular brightness of people who've been somewhere warm. My mother had a beach bag still slung over her shoulder. My sister's highlights had been touched up at some point during the trip. They came into the room and my sister went straight to me and hugged me carefully around the incision and said, "You poor thing," and I felt nothing except tired. My mother looked around the room and said, "You seem to be doing well. They've taken good care of you." She said it the way you say everything's fine to close a subject. Clara was not in the room. She'd arrived the previous evening and stayed until I fell asleep. And she'd said she would give me space when my family came. She said I shouldn't have to manage that on top of everything else. My sister asked about discharge. My mother asked about recovery time and whether I'd be able to watch the house while they took a long weekend in Nashville in a few weeks. I looked at my mother and thought, with a clarity that surprised me, I wonder when the last time was that you asked how I was sleeping. Not recovering sleeping. How I was actually doing. The version of that question that doesn't have a practical answer attached to it. I didn't say any of that. I said I need a few more days before discharge. The doctor wants to monitor some markers. My sister's expression shifted slightly. She said, "Oh, how much longer do you think?" My mother said the hotel room in Nashville is non-refundable. I told them the nurse would know more and let them go find Patricia, who was neither warm nor unkind to them, and told them nothing beyond what was medically necessary. On their way back through the lobby, the desk nurse handed my sister the visitor log for my room. Protocol, apparently, for insurance and next of kin documentation. My sister had been listed as my emergency contact still, from years ago when I'd filled out the hospital's intake forms without thinking about it. That was when she saw Clara's name. 6 nights in a row. She came back into my room with the log, and her whole face had changed. The warmth was gone, and something harder was underneath it. "Who is Clara Hewitt?" she said. I looked at her. I let the silence go a beat longer than was comfortable. Then I said, "She's our aunt. Mom's sister." My sister's head turned toward my mother, who was standing in the doorway. My mother's expression did something complicated and private that lasted only a second before she rearranged it. "That woman is not your aunt," she said. "She is," I said. "Biologically. Whatever else you want to call it." My mother stepped into the room and let the door close behind her. Her voice dropped to the register she used when things were getting out of hand. "Rowan told you things. Maya, I'm telling you, she is not someone you want in your life. She is manipulative. She caused enormous damage to this family. I don't know what she said to you, but you cannot trust it. She's been here every night," I said. "For 6 nights. While you were in Aruba." My mother opened her mouth. I kept going. I've been running the numbers in my head since I've had nothing to do but lie here and think. The money I've given this family over the last 4 years because it was always an emergency, always a crisis, always something only I could fix. $73,000. I was precise about it. 73,400 and change. My sister's jaw tightened. "Maya, I'm not finished," I said. My voice was very calm. Nurses learn that early calm is not the same as okay. Calm is a tool you use when okay isn't available. $4,000 toward your wedding. Before that, the car, the deposits, Dad's physical therapy, all of it while I worked double shifts and ate lunch in the break room and didn't go on a single vacation in 4 years because I was always catching up. You chose to help, my mother said. No one forced you. You taught me that saying no meant losing you, I said. That's not a choice. That's a condition. My mother's face shifted. She looked at my sister. My sister looked at the floor. I called the nurse station while you were talking to Patricia, I said. I changed my emergency contact this morning. You're no longer on my medical file. My sister looked up. What? I had the paperwork ready. Clara witnessed it last night. You don't have any access to my medical decisions, my discharge timeline, or any information about my care. The desk nurse downstairs has been notified. My mother's voice sharpened. You can't do that. I already did, I said. Proper forms. Hospital administrator. Completely legal. My mother took a step toward the bed. Her hands were rigid at her sides. Maya, you're being dramatic. You had an appendectomy. People have appendectomies every day. You're acting like we abandoned you. You were in Aruba, I said. For 9 days after I called you from pre-op. You said it was minor. I said I was going into surgery alone, and it should be straightforward, I said. And you said, okay, keep me posted, and hung up. The room went very still. My mother's expression moved through several things. Quickly defensiveness, recalculation, something that might have been the beginning of shame, and then the familiar hardening that always won. You're not being fair, she said. We had non-refundable flights. We had other people depending on us to be there, and I had no one depending on me to be okay? I said. That was the whole point, wasn't it? I'm the reliable one. The one who lands on her feet. I don't require anything. I'm maintenance-free, so you didn't have to weigh me against anything else, because I didn't count as a factor. My sister's voice came out smaller than usual. That's not, we don't think of you that way. How do you think of me? I asked. Because when I look at the last 4 years, I see someone you called when money ran out and didn't call when she was in a hospital bed. And I'd like to understand the version of that where I'm not a resource you manage. My sister didn't answer. My mother's mouth opened and closed. I want you to leave, I said, not because I'm angry. I'll be angry later, probably for a long time, and I'll have to figure out what to do with that. But right now I'm still recovering, and you being here is not helping me recover, so I need you to go. My mother's voice went cold the way it gets when she's lost the room and knows it. If you do this, she said, if you decide to let that woman into your life, I can't be responsible for what it does to this family. You haven't been responsible for much of what it's done to me, I said. I don't think that's the threat you think it is. My sister touched my mother's arm. Let's go, she said quietly. She wasn't looking at me. She was looking at the wall above my head, which meant she was thinking about herself, about how to process this in a way that was manageable for her. That was fine. That was her work to do. My mother stood at the door for a moment. She was waiting, I think, for me to soften, for the familiar guilt to show up and do its job. It was there, I won't pretend it wasn't. It sat in my chest like a small stone, and it said you're breaking something, and you won't get it back. I knew the stone's voice very well. I'd been listening to it for years. I didn't say anything. My mother left. My sister followed without looking back. The door settled shut behind them, and the quiet of the room pressed in, and I sat with the stone in my chest and waited to see what would happen next. What happened next was Patricia. She came in to check my vitals and adjust the IV, and she did it all without commenting on what she'd heard through the door, which was certainly everything, because hospital walls are thin. She checked the monitor. She wrote something on the clipboard. Then she straightened the water cup on my tray table and said, "Your evening visitor is in the hall." I nodded. She let Clara in. Clara came to the chair beside my bed and sat down the way she always did, without ceremony, without requiring anything from me. She looked at my face and seemed to read whatever was in it accurately. "How are you?" she asked. "I feel like I'm going to cry, and I really don't want to," I said. "That's a reasonable place to be," she said. I looked at the ceiling. I've been the person who shows up for everyone else for so long that I don't know what to do when someone shows up for me. Clara was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You don't have to do anything. You just have to let it be real." I exhaled slowly. Why didn't you come sooner? I said again. Not as an accusation this time. Genuinely. Clara turned her bracelet on her wrist. A slow, deliberate motion. I told myself your life was full enough without the complication of me. But the honest answer is that showing up costs something. It means the person might not want you there. It means you might be turned away. I waited until I couldn't stand the cost of not coming more than the cost of coming. She paused. You called 911 for a woman named Grace Hollowell 4 years ago. Do you remember her? I thought for a moment. Older woman. Cardiac event in a parking lot off 5th. I'd been coming off a shift, street clothes, and I'd stopped when I saw her go down. I'd stayed on the line with dispatch and performed compression assist until the ambulance arrived. Clara said, Grace Hollowell is my neighbor and my closest friend. She told me what happened. She told me your name, your hospital. I wrote it down. And then I didn't do anything with it for 4 years because I was afraid. She looked at me directly. I'm sorry it took me this long. The stone in my chest did something different then. It didn't go away, but it changed texture, became less like something to carry and more like something to acknowledge. You came, I said. I came. She agreed. We sat there for a while. The machine beside my bed beeped its steady rhythm. Outside the window, the Ohio sky had gone dark early the way it does in autumn, and the parking lot lights were on, casting a cold white glow over the bare trees. I'd been the last person to leave a hospital shift more times than I could count. I'd been the one who stayed late, who covered the gap, who said I'll handle it when no one else stepped up. I'd done it at work and I'd done it at home, and I'd done it so consistently that I had started to confuse the doing with the being, as if the only version of me that existed was the version that was useful. I thought about the woman in the parking lot, Grace Hollowell, and how I hadn't done anything extraordinary. I'd just stopped. I'd just stayed. I hadn't weighed the inconvenience or the awkward post-event conversation or what it would cost me to stand in a parking lot in my street clothes and put my hands on a stranger's chest and count. I'd just been present because someone needed presence, and that had felt like the obvious thing to do. And 4 years later, that ordinary moment had sent someone to sit outside a hospital door for 6 nights in a row. That's the thing about showing up. You never know which version of it someone is going to remember. Discharge came 3 days later, on my schedule. Clara drove me to my apartment and helped me up the stairs and made tea while I sat on the couch with a pillow against my side. My phone had 14 unread messages. My mother, twice. My sister, 8 times. My father, for the first time in weeks, a single message that said, I hope you feel better soon and we can talk when things calm down. I set the phone face down on the coffee table and didn't touch it. Clara put the tea on the table beside me and settled into the armchair across the room with her own cup. She'd brought soup from a place near the highway. She'd remembered, from a conversation 2 days prior, that I couldn't have anything too acidic while the incision healed. I want to talk about the money, I said. Clara looked at me steadily. Not the money I gave them. That's gone. I know that. I mean going forward. I want to close the joint account my mother has access to. I want to cancel the automatic transfers I'd set up for my sister's household account. I want to start over from zero with my own finances without a structural hole built into them. Clara nodded. I can help you with that if you want. I did financial planning for 15 years before I retired. Of course you did, I said. And I laughed a little, which pulled at the incision, which made me wince, which made Clara lean forward with an expression of focused concern that I was not prepared for. I'm okay, I said. I'm okay. She settled back. Good. I watched her for a moment. She had my mother's nose and my grandmother's chin from the photographs, and the eyes I'd somehow always thought were specifically mine. I'd been told my whole life that I had my grandmother's eyes. No one had mentioned that I'd gotten them the same way Clara had, same lineage, same inheritance. You're going to be in my life now, I said. I said it plainly, not as a question. If you want that, Clara said. I do, I said. I want people in my life who choose to be there, not people who are there because I'm useful or because the guilt mechanism is still working. People who come and sit outside glass doors when they don't know if they're wanted. That's the bar now. That's a good bar, Clara said. I picked up the tea. It was the right temperature. Outside the window, the trees were bare, and the afternoon light was the thin, clear kind that only comes in Ohio in late October. Honest light, the kind that doesn't make anything look warmer than it is. I had a leave of absence from the hospital for 3 weeks. I had a list of financial accounts to close and one to build. I had a person across from me who had driven 4 hours and sat in a plastic chair in a fluorescent-lit hallway to be someone I didn't know I could count on. My sister called again that evening. I let it ring. She texted afterward. "Maya, I know you're angry. I want to talk when you're ready. I'm sorry we didn't come home sooner. I was afraid of ruining the trip, and I told myself you'd be fine, and I know that wasn't right. I don't want to lose you over this." I read it twice. Then I set the phone down and thought about the difference between an apology and the beginning of an apology. She was at the beginning. Maybe she'd get to the full version. Maybe she'd get there and mean it. I didn't know yet, and I didn't have to decide tonight. What I knew tonight was smaller and more manageable. I knew there was soup in the refrigerator. I knew I would sleep better than I had in a week. I knew the incision would take time, and the finances would take time, and the grief of losing the version of my family I'd wanted them to be would take the most time of all. I knew that a woman named Grace Hollowell had survived a cardiac event in a parking lot because I stopped, and I knew that Ripple had come back to me in a way I hadn't expected and couldn't have engineered. You give steadiness to people who are breaking. That was the job. I'd spent years doing it for everyone around me. I was starting to think it was time to learn how to do it for myself. Not perfectly, not all at once, not without the occasional moment of sitting in a dim apartment with a teacup and feeling the full weight of what I was letting go of, but steadily, one choice at a time, starting with this: the chair across from me, occupied. The door to my apartment, closed. The accounts my family had treated like their own, closing one by one. The woman with my grandmother's eyes, staying. Not because I'd been useful, not because the guilt engine was running, just because she'd looked at the cost of showing up and the cost of staying away and chosen, after a long time of getting it wrong, to show up. I was beginning to understand that this was what it felt like. Not gratitude exactly, though that was part of it. Not relief, though that was there too. It felt like proof, the kind you spend years looking for in the wrong places, in the approval of people who dole it out conditionally, in the silence that follows a transferred payment, in the warmth of being called the reliable one, as though reliability is the same as being loved. Real proof doesn't feel like praise. Real proof feels like a chair that's occupied when you wake up. It feels like someone who sat outside a glass door for 6 nights and asked for nothing except the chance to be let in. I finally understood the difference. And I wasn't going to forget it.